Sunday, May 10th, 1996. The time just past 11:30 a.m. At 29,000 feet, the summit of Mount Everest gleams under the thin atmosphere, an untouchable beacon of human triumph. But as climbers from multiple expeditions make their final push to the top, something is terribly wrong. A storm begins to brew. Not a minor flurry, but a violent, unrelenting tempest that threatens to swallow the mountain whole. Communications are breaking down. Oxygen supplies are dwindling. And yet climbers, driven by ambition and the belief they can make it, refuse to turn back. By the time night falls, several climbers are stranded in the death zone, frostbite creeping through their bodies as temperatures plummet to 40 Sumanger. Shouts for help echo faintly in the freezing wind, but rescuers can't reach them. As dawn breaks on May 11th, the tragedy unfolds in the harshest light imaginable. But here's the thing. This wasn't just another climbing accident. Conflicting accounts emerge. Critical decisions are questioned. And the real mystery? How did one of the most experienced teams on Everest find themselves in such a catastrophic situation? Was it human error? A misjudgment of the mountain's infamous unpredictability? Or could there be more to this story, something hidden in the ice? Stay with us as we unravel the chilling events of Everest's deadliest day and uncover the truth behind what really happened that fateful weekend. Everest's allure and the climbers of 1996. Mount Everest. To most, it's the ultimate symbol of human achievement, towering at 29,032 feet. Conquering its summit is more than a personal victory, it's a claim to immortality. But in May 1996, that allure came with deadly consequences, leaving the world to question the very nature of the pursuit. To understand what went wrong on May 10th, we need to go back to the days leading up to the tragedy. By early May, Everest Base Camp was buzzing with activity. Multiple teams were preparing for their summit pushes, including 2 commercial expeditions led by seasoned guides. Rob Hall of Adventure Consultants and Scott Fisher of Mountain Madness. Both Hall and Fisher were Everest veterans, well regarded in the mountaineering community. Hall, a meticulous planner, was known for his cautious approach, while Fisher, charismatic and daring, often seemed to thrive on risk. Their teams consisted of a mix of clients, experienced climbers chasing their ultimate goal, and amateurs who had paid small fortunes for a shot at the peak. But 1996 was different. It wasn't just about climbing the mountain. It was about climbing the mountain in an increasingly crowded and competitive environment. That spring, the number of climbers attempting to summit had surged to record highs, creating bottlenecks at critical points. Everest's slopes had become a chaotic maze of tents, ropes, and overconfident adventurers, all driven by the same dream. And then there was the weather. Forecasts predicted a narrow window of clear skies around May 10th, prompting nearly every team on the mountain to plan their summit bid for the same day. The result? A high-stakes gamble, with climbers waiting hours in the so-called death zone, where oxygen is scarce and every decision becomes a matter of life and death. As the storm approached, red flags were already piling up. Reports of delays in rope installations, arguments over turnaround times, and whispers of tension between expedition leaders as their clients grew restless and the pressure to succeed mounted. But the biggest mystery, despite their expertise and preparation, how did Rob Hall and Scott Fisher, 2 of the most experienced guides on the mountain, allow their teams to fall into such peril? The investigation into what went wrong would uncover a series of shocking revelations. But even then, some questions would remain unanswered. Why were critical warnings ignored? Did overconfidence cloud judgment? Or was the mountain simply unforgiving to even the best of them? These questions would drive the search for answers. And as survivors began to recount their stories, the chilling truth of what happened that day slowly started to emerge. The summit that never sleeps. As May 10th dawned, the climbers on Rob Hall's and Scott Fisher's teams began their ascent from Camp Four, located just below the South Col at 26,000 feet. The air was razor thin, every breath a struggle. But for these climbers, many of whom had invested years of preparation and life savings into this moment, turning back was unthinkable. Early in the climb, the delays started. The infamous bottleneck at the Hillary Step, a narrow near-vertical rock face just below the summit, had created a traffic jam of climbers. Fixed ropes weren't properly secured, forcing climbers to wait in the death zone, wasting precious time and oxygen. As the hours ticked by, the thin margin for error began to shrink. By the time the first climbers reached the summit, it was already past 1 p.m., dangerously late for a safe descent. Experienced mountaineers know that a strict turnaround time is non-negotiable. But on May 10th, clients begged for extra minutes to take photographs, reveling in the triumph of their ascent. Rob Hall, usually uncompromising, made the fateful decision to stay with his struggling client, Doug Hansen, long after the window for safe return had passed. Meanwhile, Scott Fisher, who had been showing signs of fatigue and altitude sickness, was noticeably absent from the summit celebrations. Reports would later suggest he was lagging behind his group, possibly due to a combination of physical strain and the immense mental toll of leading such a high-stakes expedition. By late afternoon, the summit was shrouded in thick clouds, the early signs of the storm that would engulf the climbers. As darkness fell, the situation spiraled into chaos. Climbers became disoriented, separated from their teams in the whiteout conditions. Some simply sat down in the snow, too weak to continue. The first emergency calls crackled over the radio, but as rescuers scrambled to organize a response, a chilling realization set in. The storm was so fierce that no help could reach the stranded climbers. And then, amidst the panic, an unsettling rumor began to circulate. A climber had reportedly been seen walking away from the group, heading further into the storm. Who were they? And why would anyone willingly leave the relative safety of their team? A face in the snow. The morning of May 11th brought haunting discoveries. Rescuers braved the brutal conditions to locate survivors, but many climbers were never seen alive again. Among them were Doug Hansen and Rob Hall, who had remained together on the mountain, their oxygen depleted. Hall's final radio call to base camp, a farewell to his pregnant wife, would become one of the most heartbreaking moments of the tragedy. But not every story ended in despair. Miraculously, Beck Weathers, one of the climbers thought to be dead, was found alive. Beck had been left for dead twice, his face frost-bitten beyond recognition, his hands frozen solid. Yet somehow he managed to stagger back to Camp 4, defying all odds. Weathers' survival was inexplicable. Doctors would later describe his condition as a 1-in-a-million case of sheer willpower, overcoming physiological limits. But his account of what happened on the mountain raised even more questions. Beck spoke of seeing a lone figure moving through the storm, a figure he couldn't identify, heading away from the established route. Who was this mysterious figure? Some speculated it was a hallucination, a trick of the mind under extreme duress. Others believed it could have been Scott Fisher, disoriented and searching for shelter. But the most unsettling theory? What if this figure wasn't one of their own at all? Whatever the truth, the mystery of the figure in the storm added an eerie new layer to an already incomprehensible tragedy. And as investigators pieced together the events of that night, one thing became clear. The full story of what happened on Everest might never be known. Cliffhanger. Was the figure seen by Beck Weathers the key to understanding what went wrong? Or just another unsolvable mystery in the death zone? Section 4. Theories from the death zone. The events of May 10th and 11th, 1996, left survivors and investigators grappling with one burning question: how did it all go so horribly wrong? In the weeks and months that followed, interviews, testimonies, and radio logs began to shed light on the tragedy. Yet even as details emerged, they only added layers of complexity to the mystery. Theory 1. Human error and overconfidence. Some pointed to human error as the root cause. Rob Hall and Scott Fisher, while seasoned guides, had made decisions that went against their usual protocols. Hall's decision to wait with Doug Hansen past the agreed-upon turnaround time was seen as uncharacteristically risky. Fisher's physical state, possibly weakened by altitude sickness or overexertion, may have clouded his judgment. The commercialization of Everest was also under scrutiny. The growing trend of pay-to-play mountaineering meant that many climbers on the mountain lacked the experience to handle the harsh conditions. For some, the dream of summiting may have overshadowed the very real risks. Did Hall and Fisher feel pressured to deliver results for their clients, even at the expense of safety? Theory 2, the storm. The weather was another major factor. Forecasts had suggested a brief window of calm on May 10th, but the storm arrived earlier and with greater intensity than expected. Climbers were caught off guard, and by the time they realized the severity of the situation, it was too late. Some questioned whether the teams had been adequately prepared for such a scenario. Had they underestimated the mountain's notorious unpredictability, or were they simply unlucky? Theory 3. The figure in the snow. And then there was the mystery of the figure Beck Weathers claimed to have seen in the storm. Was it a hallucination, born of extreme hypoxia and exhaustion? Or could it have been another climber, possibly even Scott Fisher, wandering in a desperate attempt to survive? But a more unsettling theory emerged from this account. The figure may not have been human at all. Everest has long been steeped in folklore, with Sherpas telling stories of spirits or yetis that haunt its slopes. Some speculated that the figure represented something otherworldly, a manifestation of the mountain's wrath, punishing those who dared to ascend its sacred peak. The bottleneck and crowding. Finally, investigators zeroed in on the crowded conditions at the Hillary Step. The delays caused by too many climbers vying for the summit on the same day had created a perfect storm of mismanagement. Oxygen supplies ran out, critical hours were lost, and as climbers pushed beyond their physical limits, their ability to make sound decisions deteriorated rapidly. Each of these theories offers a piece of the puzzle, but none fully explain the chain of events that led to such widespread devastation. What's clear is that Everest, for all its allure, remains a place where ambition collides with nature's unforgiving power. Yet one question lingers. Was the tragedy of 1996 an isolated incident or a warning sign of more disasters to come? The unforgiving mountain. After months of investigations, interviews, and analysis, the tragedy of May 1996 was declared one of the deadliest disasters in Everest's history. While the mystery of the figure in the snow and the ultimate decisions made by Hall and Fisher remain unsolved, some questions found answers, or at least plausible explanations. The fatal combination. It wasn't one factor that caused the disaster, but a confluence of events. The overcrowding, the delays at the Hillary Step, the unexpected ferocity of the storm, and the willingness of climbers to push beyond safety margins all contributed. Everest is a place where even small missteps can turn fatal, and in 1996, those missteps added up in the worst possible way. Hall's decision to stay with Doug Hansen was one of loyalty and compassion. While it cost him his life, it also reinforced the respect many climbers held for him. Fisher's deteriorating condition may have been overlooked by his team, a stark reminder that even the most experienced guides are not immune to the mountain's effects. The mystery of the figure in the snow. As for the figure Beck Weathers saw, no conclusive evidence ever emerged. Many believe it was a hallucination, a product of Beck's critical condition. Others suggest it may have been a climber from another team, equally lost in the storm. The eerie notion of an otherworldly presence, while intriguing, remains a matter of speculation. What's undeniable is that Everest, with its near-mythical reputation, continues to draw climbers from around the globe. Yet the events of 1996 have become a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the mountain's deadly potential. The legacy of 1996. In the years since, Everest has only grown more crowded. Advances in weather forecasting and technology have made climbing marginally safer, but the commercialization of Everest has continued to create dangerous conditions. The lessons of 1996 about respecting turnaround times, preparing for the unexpected, and prioritizing safety over ambition are often overshadowed by the rush to the summit. Unanswered questions. And so the mystery of Everest remains. Was the 1996 tragedy a perfect storm of human error and natural forces? Or does the mountain itself, with its unique challenges and perils, hold secrets we may never fully understand? Conclusion. Mount Everest is more than a mountain. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest ambitions and flaws. For those who climb it, the journey is a test of endurance, skill, and willpower. But it is also a gamble, one where the stakes are life and death. As we look back on the events of 1996, one thing becomes clear. Everest doesn't forgive. The answers we seek may lie buried beneath its icy peaks, but perhaps some questions are better left unanswered. What would you risk to stand at the top of the world? If you found this story gripping, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries.